lot of creators don't understand the value of email. I genuinely believe I hesitate to say the most, but pretty close to the most valuable asset you could have. I don't know that anybody necessarily thinks of a social channel as like an asset for their business, but I would say that a newsletter is an asset. I think moving forward, we're going to see more and more value from having a newsletter.
I think that's what a lot of new creators need to understand here when we say newsletters. This isn't just sending out an email every week. It's an entire content ecosystem for your business that runs behind the scenes, helping you build that business, build retention, build referrals, even getting those contextualized signals for potential clients. That, I think, is where the real power of a newsletter is. Okay, today I'm going to be talking with Kyle Adams, who has got 10 years plus experience with newsletters and newsletter growth. He spent 4 years working with Kit, helping big creators build their newsletters and build their newsletters to generate meaningful revenue, but now is building his own systems. So Kyle, thanks for being on. Really excited to talk with you today.
Thanks for having me, Elliot. I'm really excited to dive into this. I'm a little bit of a newsletter nerd, so this will be an exciting conversation.
I love it. So give us a bit of a rundown. Like, when it comes to newsletters, what are we talking about here? I mean, are these B2B companies that have got like a few hundred subscribers? Is it bigger businesses that have got thousands of subscribers? What have you been working on?
Yeah, so most of my time working with large creators has been like really, really large lists. And as much as I love helping that group, I don't know, there's just something about the people building towards something that's sustainable for them at the fairly early stages. And in my mind, like fairly early stage would be 5 to 10K subscribers, somewhere in that range, where you've built something, you've started to understand your audience, but now you're really getting serious about, this is something I could go solo with, continue with, really build a business out of. And that's the group I would love to help. You know, mostly historically, I've been helping creators with 80, 90, 100,000 plus subscribers.
Wow.
And it's great to help them, and it's great to help them continue to grow. But through my newsletter that I've grown, I've really focused in on helping people like take a lot of those strategies and things I've learned from these bigger creators and start pushing on more growth in their own systems inside of the newsletter.
That's amazing. I mean, it's funny, when we first started this conversation, I would have thought a big newsletter would have been, you know, maybe 10, 20,000, like years of growth as well. But that is much bigger than I was anticipating. And you're finding that it's not big businesses that have these newsletters and like 50,000 subscribers, 100,000 subscribers. It's solo creators.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes you talk with people and they have, let's say, 80,000 subscribers, and you ask, how have you grown this thing? What have you done over time? And for some of them, the answer is, I just put a sign up on my website and I've grown this list and I don't really know what to do with it, which blows my mind. There's others who, of course, have put in tons of time and effort to get to the place where they are. And so it definitely varies in how somebody's gotten to that point. But I don't know, I'm just a strong believer in email and newsletters and those being really significant for creators.
Yeah, it's funny. I've just had a couple of conversations exactly on this topic with Justin Moore and Dustin Rieckman, and they both said the same thing. You know, the newsletter engine for building a business has much more value than I think a lot of early creators give it credit. And it does feel very overwhelming when you hear, you know, someone having a newsletter with 50,000 subscribers. How do you get there? And then there's the few that have, you know, a little sign on their website and suddenly they've got 80,000 of them. But I think that's probably the exception. So if someone is a new creator, why should they prioritize building a newsletter and getting through that sort of first 0 to 5,000 stage if they want to build a business?
Yeah, well, historically and still relevant today, conversions from an email list versus something like a social channel are much higher. You're much more likely to get conversions out of a newsletter. And that's kind of what started me down the path of really loving email and newsletters and focusing in on that. It's funny because a lot of people I talk with feel like I just love email and newsletters. And I don't know, it's just kind of funny. Like, that's not really the point for me. My whole focus is helping creators grow. And that has been a passion of mine for a while. I used to go to a lot of conferences and talk with people who had this passion for doing something that they really love, that they wanted to make a business, that they wanted to grow. They were doing all this stuff on social and they just weren't getting very far. They weren't getting much traction. They didn't hear from people. If they sold something, they were getting very little sales. And it kind of clicked for me in that moment that a lot of creators don't understand the value of email. And so through that like desire for me to see people essentially live out what they really want to do in life, the thing that they're inclined to do, that I truly believe is like their purpose, right? In that pursuit, I focused in on email and newsletters because I just want people to dive into that and really understand how important that channel is. And I think moving forward, we're going to see more and more value from having a newsletter. And I say that because of AI. And I'm not one of those like fear mongering, oh, AI is going to take over everything kind of people. I definitely use AI in my processes, but I do see a world fairly soon where AI takes over a lot of the content channels. So if you think about, unfortunately, even LinkedIn, where I've been doing a lot of posting, or Instagram, Twitter, a lot of those places, like they're going to be taken over by AI content. And those platforms have no incentive to get rid of that because their whole game is retention. People on the platform seeing ads, getting money from that. There's no reason for them to take that away. Even if it means that people have to scroll more to find a real human, it means they've stayed on the platform longer. So I see a world in the future where social is essentially pay to play. And we've kind of seen that with X and how you pretty much have to pay for one of their paid tiers to really show up in anybody's feed at this point, or you have to boost your post or whatever you do. And I think that's just going to continue to perpetuate through social. So while, yes, it's really important to have a newsletter for the conversions, it's also important for like, I honestly hate the term owning your audience. I know a lot of people say own your audience. I feel like that just sounds like you somehow control the people there. But it's more so like you control that channel essentially. So if you're on LinkedIn or you're on X or wherever, you don't own those followers. You can't decide what's going to happen with them. If they decide to kick you off the platform tomorrow, you have no access to them anymore. But with email, you own that list and you can move that wherever you'd like to. If you get tired of a platform you're using for email, you can move to a different one. So there's that aspect along with, the conversions. And then also this future where I really believe newsletters and communities, places where people are, is going to be more and more valuable for creators.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we've gotten into this, and this is a super big misunderstanding when you're an early founder or creator. You want to get your creator journey started as an entrepreneur. You feel like I've got to be on a social channel to get an audience. And so we feel like posting content and getting a ton of impressions is us building our business. And then we look at a newsletter and it's like, well, I'm going to have to grind to get 100, 200 subscribers compared to 10,000 impressions over here. So we push the newsletter aside. But the way I describe it to my clients, the coaching program is, would you rather have a store that has 10,000 people walk by or 100 people come in? There's a big difference between those two. If you've got a store and no one's ever coming in, how successful is it? If 10,000 people are just walking past every day, that doesn't actually do you any good. But if you have a store and 10 people are coming in every day, let alone 100, that's huge. Now you can actually start engaging them with your offer and you have a business. And I feel like social quick wins distract a lot of creators from the value of building an audience, even a small one with a newsletter. But it really does have a lot of long-term value for a growing business. So how do you see things developing then with creators building businesses when it comes to their newsletters? Do you think they're going to focus mainly on AI-driven content and that will increase? Or are the newsletter creators that are really, putting in the work, they're writing it themselves, they're changing up their content, are they going to be the ones that sort of end up on top? What do you think?
I believe they're definitely going to end up on top. This is something I've thought so much about because at some point, it's probably going to be pretty easy to give AI a prompt. I mean, at this point, it somewhat is already, but you can tell when it's AI. But at some point, this is the worst it's going to be, right? So at some point, when we put in a prompt to write a newsletter or write a social post or whatever, we're probably going to get pretty good results. But those results are always based on the knowledge that AI has. So what can differentiate you? And one of those things is your stories. That's something that AI can't really take away from you, right? Or like learn without you telling it something. So I think more focused towards a storytelling type approach is really going to help people stand out against a lot of this AI content. I think it already is in many aspects, like on social for sure. It's helping a lot. I think it's going to continue to, as we see this stuff grow, it's going to continue to be more and more important to share yourself as much as possible. I think we're going to be grasping more and more for what's real versus what's not real. And the more you can prove out the fact that you're real, which is part of why I think communities are also going to be more and more significant over time, because you have real people in there having conversations. Yeah, I think those are the people who are going to be on top, the ones who don't just rely on whatever AI gives them, but they're actually putting that intentionality into it and interacting with their audience is another big key. Like I send people audio messages quite a bit through LinkedIn and different places. As you know, I've kind of bombarded you with them, but but I do that because I want to like show it's me. I'm a real person. I really want to have a conversation with you. And I think to some degree that makes an impression versus, okay, is this some AI thing that someone wrote to me and they just made it look good? I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. I know what you mean. The number of DMs I get where you can see that it's either just been scripted or is AI is a bit shocking. And the cold email thing has now sort of worked its way into the DMs of social channels, that's another topic. But
yeah,
I think it really comes down to the relationship aspect of it, where you can have a conversation with someone. I even found in my last business, the big collaborations that we built, with multi-billion-dollar brands was because I sat at a table with a guy over lunch and we had a conversation. It wasn't because I sent 1,000 cold emails. And I think the relationship that you can build with someone through a newsletter when they're actually engaging with your stories has more of an impact to your business and your bottom line as you grow. I think there's two strategies there, short-term and long-term, depending upon how you use your newsletter, what kind of calls to action you got. If your offer is dialed in and will interest your audience, like there's a lot to line up there. But with that in mind, where do you see newsletters fitting in as a system for business growth to add revenue to a company? Or let's say to a creator's journey as an entrepreneur building a business themselves?
Yeah, I like to refer to a newsletter as the hub of marketing for your business. I think in many ways, it's kind of the hub of a lot of things. But the goal I always try to encourage people to take is looking at social as a mechanism to get people into a newsletter, right? Because once you can get them into the newsletter, you can take them other places. So your product offerings, the things that you generate revenue with, you can promote all of those through your newsletter and make sure people are interested. You also have this unique advantage inside of a newsletter to be contextual with people. I think that's like often discounted because on social and platforms like that, you're just putting one message out there and you're hoping you get the right people. You don't really know a lot about the people who are interacting with it, or if you're attracting the right kind of crowd for the right kind of offer. It's a little bit of a game of put it out there and see what happens. And in a newsletter, you can get very, very contextual with people. Just as an example, I have this little automation set up in my newsletter where if somebody clicks a poll, I have a poll every week. If they choose an option there, like they're showing a positive signal that they're interested in the newsletter, they actually took action, they chose a poll result. And if they do that 3 times, which means at least 3 weeks, they've selected something in the poll, they've interacted with it, I send them an email asking them for a testimonial. It sounds like you've really, loved this newsletter. I would love to hear your feedback and all that. And it's just really contextual to them. And you can scale that up. If you think through that concept, there's so many possibilities where you're seeing essentially a score for how interested are people in certain aspects of my business. I can promote to them directly based on this knowledge I have about them. Like they're very interested in coaching, and they've at some point signified that they have 10,000 plus subscribers. Well, probably a one-on-one coaching opportunity for them would make sense. Let me send them something. So just that kind of system for your business is huge. Being able to be relevant with people and not give them this big menu of here's what I have, pick what you think is right, but actually delivering to them what you feel is right in that moment based on the information they've given you just through interacting.
Yeah, and that was huge. You helped me set that up in my email too. And I'd never considered using it as a system to gauge signals of interest and set up a system where that can stack so that I can look at my list and go, oh, they're brand new, but these guys have been following for a while and they've got all of these signal markers like traffic lights, if they've gone from red to yellow to green. And now I know who to engage with a new offer. Who's been on the list a while, has engaged with a few things in the content ecosystem, and now might be primed for coaching. I think that's what a lot of new creators need to understand here when we say newsletters. This isn't just sending out an email every week. There's systems within the newsletter package, that help you to engage your audience in a way that, it's automated. Like it's grabbing those signals for you and feeding them to you. It's helping you set up sequences to engage new subscribers, new onboarders for your paid programs. It's following up with content that's meaningful for those that dropped out. Like it's an entire content ecosystem for your business that runs behind the scenes, helping you build that business, build retention, build referrals, even getting those contextualized signals for potential clients. That, I think, is where the real power of a newsletter is. And after engaging with some of your content, I realized that this isn't something I can ignore for my business moving forward if I want to grow. And in 5 years' time, once the business has grown up a bit, if I don't have a newsletter, am I going to regret it? That was a harsh moment of truth where I decided, okay, I've got to dive in.
Yeah, I can't see anybody saying, I guess they could say it, but I don't know that anybody necessarily thinks of a social channel as like an asset for their business, but I would say that a newsletter really, it is an asset. It's something you actually tangibly control. And like I mentioned earlier, you have the list. You can take that to other platforms. You're never going to just be completely cut off from your list. Although I will say, if you have a newsletter, download your list every now and then, because if something ever happens, you don't have the file. As long as you have the file, you control the list, but there is a file involved. So
I feel like I should pause and just do that with my list right now. Yeah, you've built up all of these contacts and then suddenly you lose them. Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually think that's why most people start a newsletter. I know it was for me. I just didn't want to rely on building my business based on social channels because there's no stability there. The algorithm changes every 5 minutes. And then that demands that you do something different if you want to keep getting reach. And then you keep chasing the reach and the algorithm. And now suddenly you're not building a business anymore. You're feeding this algorithm beast that controls your life. And I hear so many of my clients say this because they just feel like they're content creators. And when I asked them, well, what do you really do? It's like, oh, I'm a Notion expert. I help people with newsletters. I go through and edit videos for new creators. They're not actually content creators. They have a service they offer. And they've gotten caught in this hamster wheel of feeding the algorithm. But you don't have to be on that cycle when you have a newsletter list that is growing with your business. Yeah, it's huge. What is it that you think holds people back from starting a newsletter?
I think there's a few things. I think the growth difference, it really affects people. Like they see the difference in, okay, I can get 100 followers on some platform in however long, maybe a few weeks, something like that. And with a newsletter, it may be like a few months or something. You're not going to grow as fast, but you are growing a lot more of the right people. To your point about, would you like 1,000 people walking by or 100 people coming in? 100 people coming in, way better. On top of that, like, do you want 100 people coming in and 10 of those people actually making a purchase versus 100 people coming in and one person makes a purchase, maybe? But I think that holds them back. I think also I've seen this so much over even just the last decade. It's been like 2 or 3 times where email's dead and then email's back and then email's dead and then email's the cool hot thing again. And it seems like this older technology, it seems like these new flashy social platforms are going to be a lot better. There's also the feedback aspect, I think. And I think that's a lot of why people gravitate towards these social platforms is that, like you mentioned, the impressions. You see, okay, people are looking at what I'm doing, and then people are interacting with what I'm doing. People are commenting on what I'm doing. Like, I see all of this activity. That activity may not translate to revenue, may not translate to actual meaningful growth for your business, but it gives you that little sense of, I'm not alone in this. Mm. And I think with newsletters, that's another thing that kind of holds people back is they start it, they send out some emails. It feels like it's just going out into the void. And there's this bit of discouragement that I'm not getting that dopamine high that I get from social on this journey, right? So yeah, I think that's just a thing to overcome, and you have to really think through, what am I building? This is a long-term asset. Like, this is something that will benefit me 5 to 10 years from now. It will continue to generate revenue, and it's not a social channel.
Yeah, it's hard thinking of the end result years down the line. Early in my working career, when I left school, I worked on the grandfather bricklaying, and we'd be on a job on foundations, and at some point you've got to lay the first brick, and you set your line up, and then you lay the second, and you go through the row, and it takes some time to see the wall coming together, and then suddenly it's a building, and there's doors and windows on it, and you built this whole thing. Amazing feeling, but in business, we don't see that tangible result as much because we don't have it physically in front of us. You have a slowly growing email list, but you've got to lay every brick on top of each other because eventually it will grow and you will have something with doors and windows that is solid and has a structure that's meaningful for your business. And I feel like sometimes we miss the point that it serves 2 purposes. A newsletter can also help build the back-end systems of your business and engage your clients, as well as build your revenue, depending upon how you use it. And I feel like that's the key. That's the education people need when they have a growing list. They put on a little ad on their website. Suddenly they've got 50,000 subscribers on this email list, and they don't know how to turn that into money. And engaging them in the right way with the right systems to actually generate revenue from it consistently, I think that's where the serious unlock comes from for growing creators. Is wanting that, learning how to get there, and then how to do that meaningfully. Where would you suggest someone in that position begin that journey?
Early on, when you're growing your newsletter, there's like, you see these people who have successfully grown a pretty large newsletter. And I see this all the time. They start talking about, well, I generated this much revenue from my newsletter, and here's what I did, and here's my systems. And early on, people get really stuck trying to build these complex systems and things to start getting people to the right places and all this stuff. And to some degree, that's okay. But really, in the early days, if you can figure out your growth levers, if you can go from 0 to 1,000, for example, without worrying about the revenue side of it yet, like you're building up this asset, you're learning about people, you're learning about your audience, you're dialing in exactly how you can grow. If you can get to that point and then start building in some systems to build revenue, I think people just take on all of it up front and they try to build these complex systems and they try to put all these things together that really a larger email list is going to have, because they hear that that's what somebody they aspire to be like is doing. And just knowing how to grow your email list in the early days is going to help you a ton, because like I said, it's really discouraging that you see this slow growth and people like really, I think they build a lot of systems and they think, okay, if I build it, they'll come, that whole, if I build this thing, people are going to come. And then they're really disappointed because it's hard to grow your list. Like it's hard to start getting people to give you an email address and start sending something to their inbox. And so the more you can learn about them, the more you can relate to them and help them feel like this is the place I need to be because this is where I'm at in my journey. The more you're going to benefit later when you start adding in specific offers and all of that into your newsletter system. So just give and give, and that also helps out with reciprocity in the future. You're giving and giving, and then people want to give back and support you.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Long-term strategy, yeah, totally, that's the key. So switching gears here a little bit, you've worked on newsletters of all kinds of different sizes. What is the biggest newsletter you have ever worked on, like from a number of subscribers? Like what is the potential ceiling here?
Multiple millions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is wild, like just to think about that. But
okay, that's a little embarrassing. I really thought you were going to say like 250,000.
No. Yeah, there's people out there with multiple millions of subscribers. There's a lot of mechanisms. Like I think once you get to a certain scale, you really have to start putting money into acquisition of new subscribers and stuff like that. But you also understand the value per subscriber. So when somebody's added to your list, what percentage of conversions do you have? And how much does that mean each of your subscribers is worth? You start being able to calculate that out and understand that if you pay $2 or something to acquire a new subscriber, it's worth it because they typically, on average, you're getting $10 per subscriber or something like that. So you're seeing a profit from it. So at those larger sizes, there's a lot of, paid ads, paid acquisition type stuff happening. Not buying lists, by the way. That's another topic. Don't buy lists. But yeah, just ways of promoting the newsletter and getting people onto it.
So at that point, I mean, your cost of acquisition for a customer and their lifetime value. So you can leverage that out with ad spend to know how to grow your list to actually affect revenue. So where should somebody begin looking at monetizing their list? Actually, I hate that expression, monetizing their list. Yeah. When should somebody start engaging their audience with a specific offer that they would genuinely be interested in?
I always hate to give it depends answers, but that's one weird thing about a newsletter. So let's just go down the path of you're just starting out, you're early on, you don't necessarily have any products or services in place yet, and you're growing this newsletter from zero. You're starting the same time you start your business, you're starting this newsletter. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of relying on the newsletter to become that sort of growth engine for you. I would say at least get through the first 1,000 without necessarily pushing any offers or anything like that, because that first 1,000 is your learning opportunity. Like you have the value you're getting from that list is really understanding your audience and who they are and what they're interested in, those kinds of things. So I would give freely during that time, during that first thousands, not expect anything in return. Going into that, I'll say 1,000 to 5,000 range, I would consider putting something into it, some even like a lower ticket offer, something like that. You're going to understand kind of the baseline of who's on your list, who's learning from you, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I'm a big believer in building up trust and reciprocity and those kinds of things. And so all the way through that 5,000 mark, like really not going too deep, maybe not up to 5,000, but maybe up to like 2,000 to 3,000, really just using that time to understand and then start adding in some ways to generate revenue from the newsletter. And then once you get to that like 5 to 10K range, that's at a place where now you've got to get like, you might actually start doing some of the paid routes, like I mentioned, because now you understand your audience, you understand what they need, and you're starting to really put offers out there in front of people in a way that results in conversions, and you have a reliable system in place and you know what they want. So that's, again, assuming you're starting from zero. If somebody's starting it today and they have an existing business and they have offers and those kinds of things, I think it would vary to some degree. But there is just such an opportunity early on to find out who is the person who saw me on social, liked what I shared, actually read it. So they went through that whole process of reading something from me, made the effort to go to my website, and from there actually gave me an email address and signed up. Like that person has some level of commitment to what you're about and learning about that and what they need, what they struggle with. I think a lot of people hesitate to ask their subscribers why they're there. Like what brought you here? What do you need? There's so much hesitation around that for some reason.
And I feel like we get caught up in tracking metrics that these different platforms give us. Social is a great one because it's always impressions, how many eyeballs are on this post. And I don't think actually impressions relate to eyeballs. We'll get into that another time. But what's more meaningful, instead of thinking of, okay, how many impressions am I getting? Where's someone at with top of funnel, bottom of funnel content? I think it's so much better just to throw funnels out the window and start looking at metrics that you create and track yourself. Like, how much of my content has someone consumed before they purchased? And does that actually give me a baseline for how much content people need to consume before they will purchase? And then start creating that, and build it on a cycle so that you're building content that engages them meaningfully with your offer and will actually get them in the door. Instead of thinking like, well, is this content top of funnel, middle of funnel, or bottom, and when should I post it? We trip ourselves up with that. And I feel like as well, when it comes to newsletter growth and working out where we sell, if the ultimate goal is, well, I'm only going to do it if I can make money, you're not building real business building systems. You're just thinking very short term. And that's probably why you're stuck on a content hamster wheel of just trying to post and then waiting for business to come in, because that's not a system. That's sort of, well, it's what everybody does in their entrepreneurial journey to get started. Until you learn, you got to start treating it like a business. I've been there too. But I think this really outlines the value of newsletters and the different stages you go through for it to grow. There are going to be different systems from 0 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 5,000, from 5,000 to 10,000 subscribers and beyond. How would you go about helping someone in the 5 to, let's say 20,000 subscriber range build things up for their business?
Some people do this early, but I think at that point, the majority have really just worked to get people on the list. Like they've just brought people in under a single premise of, this is what I share here, this is what I talk about. They're sharing, the same content with everybody, and they're not doing a lot of testing. And so at that 5K plus range, that's really the point where, and it's not a magic number, like 5K isn't the magic number, but generally at that point, start start really testing and seeing what happens. Because once you get to that size, you're very likely to start getting replies from people, which that's a whole other topic. But I can't believe how few people try to get replies because they're like, well, I don't want to reply to a bunch of emails. Like, that's gold, especially in the early days when you have that even up to 5,000, and I would say even beyond, getting those replies, hearing from people, but then actually engaging with them and understanding, okay, who is this subscriber? So let's say you put a piece of content out there is targeted towards a certain group, a subgroup inside of your audience. So my newsletter is for people growing their newsletter, so it's kind of a weird thing. But let's say I put something out there I know is targeted towards people in that 5 to 10K range. They should be really interested in this topic based on what I understand. Somebody replies and says, wow, this was like incredible. I feel like I've unlocked this new way to go about growing my newsletter. Great. I mean, that's awesome. I think a lot of people would just respond and say, well, that's great. Thank you so much. I hope you continue enjoying it. But why not instead find out more about them? Like, how big is their list? Where are they at? Because at that point, you start understanding, if I put a piece of content out here about this thing, who is it appealing? Am I actually appealing to the right group? Do I have that group in this list? Right? Do it like, you don't necessarily know who everyone is. So I think once you get over that 5K range, you really should begin dialing in a lot of these systems, even what I talked about earlier of having that kind of scoring for certain things. Now you kind of, what your content topics typically are. You should have dialed in, how can I reach people at certain subsets of my audience? And then you start kind of scoring them, finding out more about them, being a little bit more contextual, personalizing a lot of stuff, making the right kind of offers at the right time. And that's going to scale things so much easier. I think even at that point, I'm kind of weird about lead magnets. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you have to have a lead magnet. I don't have a lead magnet for my newsletter, which may seem kind of weird, but the thing I've been running on is I want people to sign up because they want the content of the newsletter. And that might mean I grow a little bit slower. If I had a lead magnet, maybe they would sign up because they want the thing. But I want people who want to sign up for what they're going to get out of being on the list. And so bringing them in, and then at the point you're at that 5+ range, now you understand what people really want, and you could create lead magnets, but you know that lead magnet is going to bring in the right kind of person in that subset of your audience. And you're going to be able to tie that into a revenue stream somewhere. So I hope that wasn't a long way of answering that question, but yeah, I think at that point, you're just thinking more in terms of systems. At the beginning, you're just trying to grow the thing, share content, and really kind of have fun with it up until that 5K+ range.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, that's kind of, I've had another creator say the same thing, but that's the point of this channel, creator built systems. There isn't a quick and easy explanation for them. Like, it takes time to build these systems and have them work the way you intended them. So I feel like, the answer that you have given there will give a lot of listeners structure to what they've been building. And I think it's tying in a few of the different systems creators use to build their businesses to actually have systems that stack, that then generate revenue for you consistently. Because ultimately our goal, and it's funny I say this, it might sound misleading, but our goal isn't to make money. Our goal is to build systems so that we can get time back to do what we enjoy, which is why we've set up these businesses that we run. And yes, it does make money, but that's never something I'll discuss on this channel, because I don't find a lot of creators that I talk with now that that's their number one goal. Actually, what they want is time freedom. And often, especially with a newsletter, the goal of starting that is that they gain more time freedom later because they've got this list that is growing and being engaged with their business that they feel is going to give them leverage to grow the company without having to go after one more client, one at a time, again and again and again. And it unlocks this freedom, for lack of a better word. I think it's freedom. But it does take some effort to get there and build that up in the beginning. So, okay, a couple of quick fire questions for you then, Kyle.
Okay.
You've got 11 years experience building newsletters, helping them grow, some cases with millions of subscribers, which honestly blew my mind. In between there is a big range. If somebody wants to grow a newsletter meaningfully for their business, how do they engage with you to learn more about doing that?
I would point them to creatorglue.com. That's where my newsletter is. Every week I share insights from either things I've learned through working with, larger creators, or my own experiments. I'm experimenting with stuff in my own newsletter all the time. So yeah, that's where I would point somebody to learn more.
And I got to tell you, Creator Glue is really good because even just the way you write is very authentic. Oh, I hate the word authentic as well. It's very real that a person is writing to you. You can tell when it's AI. I find some newsletters are just very like anybody on their team could have written it, but yours is very you. And I found it actually one of the most engaging newsletters I've subscribed to over the last year. I only have 2 that I've kept, and yours is one of them. So if you haven't checked it out, you should go and have a look at Kyle's newsletter, Creator Glue. And then second question, you've taken all of this experience, you've spent 4 years at Kit, you've worked with some big creators, you've been the educational face of their YouTube channel for a long time, educating other creators on how to start and grow newsletter lists. What's next?
Yeah, great question. I am really excited about what's next because underlying all of this newsletter stuff is my love for creators, people who want to just take something they love and put it out there. And it looks so many different ways for different people. And part of that's what's so interesting to me, like hearing people who have different sorts of businesses that do different things that they really, really care about. And so I want to continue to help creators, and I'm doing that now through some one-on-one coaching and some cohort coaching and stuff like that, really coaching through this whole growth process, coming alongside them and helping them grow that newsletter, because I genuinely believe I hesitate to say the most, but pretty close to the most valuable asset you could have. Partially because it's both a sales mechanism and a marketing mechanism. And it's so ownable from the asset standpoint. You have that email list. You can email them at any time until they unsubscribe, of course, but you can take that with you to any platform. You don't have to reset up systems if you move somewhere else. In some ways you do, if you want to build automations, all that stuff, but you have that to carry with you. So I want to help creators build that asset so that they have that in the future and they're not concerned about what's going to happen with the algorithm. Am I going to get kicked off of this platform? Is this platform going to stop existing? You saw the whole TikTok scare. Like that can happen with any of these social platforms, and people are, even YouTube, like YouTube seems like a giant and I don't see it going anywhere, but I mean, TikTok kind of felt like a giant and they were at risk for a while. So anything can happen. There's no reason to just feel like you have to be dedicated to social platforms and stuff like that. So long story short, I'm helping out through coaching and those kinds of things.
Awesome. So if somebody wants to learn more about the coaching program, the cohort that you're launching, where is the best place for them to go to hear about it?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to point back to creatorglue.com. Sign up to the list there. Send me an email. I'm kind of in early phases. I've been very fortunate. I have, several people who are already wanting to work on coaching and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'd love to talk with you if you're interested. Just go there and reply to my email, and I'm happy to chat.
Awesome. Kyle, thank you for your time on this. I think this has probably opened up a whole world of research for a lot of creators watching this on how to build a newsletter like that. So yeah, thank you. This has been huge.
Thank you. Appreciate it having me on.